Well, folks, we're at the precipice of Deadly Sin Month, and ooh, that's gonna be fun. But since we're not technically into the month yet, I'm not gonna do a video directly related to it, but rather as sort of a lead-in to some of the spicy things I'm gonna be saying later on in the month. Oh, you just wait for that. It won't be all month that I'll be doing videos on the subjects that Deadly Sin Month proffers, but we'll be doing a few, and I hope you guys will have fun with that. No. Instead, today we're going to be talking about the left and the left's utter panic at the culture wars, which have intensified over the past, you might say 10 years, depending on where you track the beginning of this. Maybe Tea Party, maybe Gamergate or something like that. Not really relevant. But what is relevant is that over the past 10 years, a lot of things have changed. First of all, starting with that the right has really started to push back on a lot of the cultural things the left is doing. But at the same time, some people will then immediately counter-argue, well, the left has gotten a lot more extreme when it comes to culture. You see, we started the decade of the 2010s off with the left, of course, majorly pushing for, say, gay marriage and that sort of thing. But we end the decade with child transition, puberty blockers, leading into incest and that sort of stuff. Just all sorts of nonsense going on at the end of the 2010s and going into the beginning of the 2020s, which we are now in. And it seems as though the left has won on a lot of these fronts, especially since a lot of this stuff, this very explicit, very extreme left-wing rhetoric, is being essentially taught in schools or being taught by corporations and all those sorts of places. And there's a lot of reasons to have a black pill with regard to all of this information. It looks really scary, but I don't think it is. And the reason I don't think it is because the left is panicked. And a lot of this is evidenced by the fact that they're being a lot more explicit about their propaganda, the fact that they're being a lot more extreme in what they're planning on doing. Remember, these people are progressives, all right? And progressivism, of course, a tactic. It's not really a political ideology, which is to say that progressivism, they go from step by step and push the culture or the politics in the direction they want to go. They don't go whole hog from the outset. And so the fact that they have almost entirely abandoned this strategy, going from not 10 years ago saying people who would be on the fringes back then are now mainstays of the party in the form of AOC or the rest of the squad and Bernie Sanders, all of these people are now almost mainstream Democrats, as opposed to what they were 10 years ago, which is fringe lunatics. This is what they've been pushed to, on top of the open rioting that they've been doing over the past few years. Openly, constant, and very destructive rioting as well. Back in the past, you'd only get those sorts of rioting every now and then. And even in the times where Antifa had a presence in the past, they weren't explicit. They didn't come out with the intention of being paraded by the media. The media certainly wouldn't condone their actions anyway, back 20 years ago, or at least not openly. But they've gone to these extremes because finally, after such a long time, arguably almost a century, of the left pushing the country ever towards communism, this persistent thing, there's finally pushback. And this is what has caused them to become as explicit as they want. And they are, in fact, panicking about this because they do not want any culture wars. No. They don't want people pushing back. They don't want a war. They want a cultural massacre. They want to see their cultural enemies or political enemies, whatever the case may be utterly destroyed without even a fight. That's why they like people like Romney. That's why they like the rhinos of the Republican Party. That's why they will spend so much time telling you, don't die on this hill. Don't do this. Don't hold your positions. Don't stand up to our cultural hegemony. No. Don't do that. Just lay down and die without a fight. I want to massacre you. That's what they're saying. And it's gotten so extreme. And the reason they believe this is not for some sort of tactical political reason, or it's not really prudence. It's actually a part of their principle, because they believe that activism for leftist issues is not just something that is good, but is in fact a requirement and as something that you have a duty to do in order to be part of this world. And this whole line of argument, I think, is best supported by this Instagram post from an account called Feminism, where they say, I do activism, and that's my rent to the world, which is a silly sentence regardless, because why are you equivocating this to rent? Why wouldn't you say duty or something like that? It essentially means the same thing, of course. Paying your rent is, of course, a duty that you have to the world, or, to whoever owns your property. But, so it's not really different, but this is what they really believe. They believe that it is your solemn duty to not only tolerate their positions, not only tolerate all of their brain-dead causes, but to actively support them, because it is your rent to the world, rent to the universe. That's what they think. They think it is your obligation to believe everything they say, to do everything that they tell you to do, and to be massacred if you don't. They don't want you to fight. And this is clear from leftism, that they never want to see a fight. That's not something they want to see. And it's never something they want to see. And it's most evident in many of the issues that we're going to be talking about over this next month. In fact, I think it's actually the most pernicious in these particular issues. Have you seen anyone say anything with regard to even the arguments used with regard to, say, gay marriage? Things like love is love, which is its absurd argument on its face that justifies way too much, and we'll get into that later on in this month. I won't go into it all here, but no, love is love will justify pretty much anything in terms of any sexual behavior. It will justify literally anything you do, because love is love. Because love is love is love is love is love. It proves way too much, and that's why we're seeing this constantly slipping into degeneracy. This is why you see so many people being outraged at the fact that some people are coming out against the idea that children should be brought to pride parades and bear witness to objectively degenerate behavior in the streets. That's why you see so much opposition to that idea. That's why you see constant opposition to the concept of that children shouldn't be abused and put on puberty blockers, which are entirely unproven drugs and not proven to do anything of worth actually whatsoever, and may in fact harm the child more than anything, including on a mental perspective, certainly from a physical perspective. If you even suggest that children shouldn't be having these sorts of drugs be pumped into them for some nonsense, some ideological nonsense, then suddenly you're a pariah. Suddenly you need to shut up. You need to stop dying on this hill. That's what they're all going to say to you. Because they want the massacre. They don't want the culture war. Because if they get the culture war, especially on things like child puberty blockers, they're going to lose, because it's so patently absurd, the idea that a child can mutilate their body for their entire life when they're 12 and they can consent to that sort of thing, or even that their parents should be allowed to choose that for them. It is so absurd on its face that no one's going to accept it at all. It's not an argument that makes any sort of logical sense. And that's the major thing with the left. They don't want the argument. They don't want to see you fight back. And that's why they've gotten so explicit recently, because they have no choice anymore. They can't perniciously keep injecting these things subtly, because, well, a lot of the tricks have been found out. People are already going to be pointing out the fake news in the media. They're already going to be pointing out the utter nonsense indoctrination that's going on in schools, because they already know the tricks, because they figured them out. Over the past decade, much of this has occurred. You've seen a lot of pushback on cultural subjects, which has almost never happened in the past. And yeah, you could bring up, well, what about the 90s? What about D&D? Conservatives being anti-D&D or anti-metal music? Well, the fact of the matter is that in most of those cases, those weren't prominent right-wing movements. They didn't end up going anywhere, really. And the few times that they did, it was Tipper Gore. So I don't want to hear anyone say, well, Jack Thompson. Jack Thompson was barely an entity. What did he actually end up getting done? Oh yeah, he created the ESRB, which if anything just validated the hobby of video gaming more rather than less. That's it, really. What's the problem? Again, he didn't really accomplish anything. So that's all I have to say on that subject. But finally, in the past decade, you actually have people on the right who are succeeding, who are winners, who are going to actually accomplish things. And the left does not like that. And, that's, I think, where I'm going to leave you guys off on that. Just remember that they want a cultural massacre. And spread that around, by the way. I want to see the term culture massacre start making its rounds, because it deserves it. I am quite proud of that term. Though, I think I made it up. Might have heard it from somewhere else. I don't think so. If so, I haven't heard it from enough people. Needs to be popularized. Go and send it out. Hashtag cultural massacre. There. And if you want to share that stuff, there are many places you can do that, including places down in the description where I have very many pretty links to places where I'm at on those platforms. For places where you can post that hashtag, there's places like Minds, Gab, Parler, and even my locals, breakingonthedaily.locals.com. Go check it out. It's going to be cool. Lots of cool stuff going to be going up there in the very short order. I was actually going to do that today on Monday, but timing constraints. It'll end up being on Wednesday. Whatever, not super relevant. Also, if you like that video, subscribe down below wherever you are. But if you're on YouTube, go and choose another place. Many other places down there, down in the description. And on Odyssey, actually, those exclusive extra rants are going to be going up there as well. So go and check out my Odyssey for that as well, once that turns around on Wednesday. All right, that's where I'm going to leave you guys off. I'm KelKidman. This has been Breaking on the Daily, and I'm out.